So Kaufman really is responsible for bringing the neoclassic style to England. She was a history painter, and she was actually very successful. She encouraged other London artists towards success as history painters. She was one of 2 women that were the founding members of the Royal Academy in England. This is kind of an interesting image of the Royal Academy of 1771 to 1772 because it shows all the founding members of the Royal Academy. But it also shows the 2 female founders of the Royal Academy. But because these guys are studying a male nude in this image, so it's like painting them as they are like studying this male nude, and then they're going to make sketches and then make their art later, it would not have been proper to include Kaufman and Mary Mosier in this image. So they have to include them because they're part of the academy, but you can't include them because it's not proper. So what they did is they actually include them as images on the wall. So even though she was kind of a big deal in England, she was still subject to these limitations because she was a woman during this time. Angelica mainly did history paintings and portraits. This is Cornelia pointing to her children as her treasures from 1785, and it's oil on canvas. And it's actually in the collection of the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, so I hope you see it when you go there. It is a history painting. It tells a story from the 2nd century BCE from the Roman Republic. So that's a very appropriate neoclassic subject matter. So it's history of the classic period. Cornelia, who is the mother of Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, who's right here, and then here her son's over here, is hanging out with this woman over here. And this woman shows up and she's showing off all her jewels to Cornelia. And then she wants to see Cornelia's jewels. And Cornelia points to her sons and says, "These are my jewels." So we've got this great little kind of tidbit story, this little anecdote with in a very classical setting. You can see the classical architecture that surrounds them. They're in classical dress, and so it's this neoclassic setting, and then it teaches morals. So it's like really great standard neoclassic example. It's also a lesson in motherhood. Cornelia provides love and care of her sons, and her sons actually grow up to be political reformers. While the setting is rather stark with this very kind of stiff-looking architecture, this classical setting, the scene is softened by the subdued lighting and the calm grace of the figure. Very classical-looking figures. I mean, really, she looks like she's a Roman matron from some of the sculptures that you may have seen in the first section of this class. Meanwhile, in France, things are getting out of hand. In the late 18th century, France is chaotic. There are lots of power changes. There's lots of reasons why the revolution started, but for our purposes, it started when Louis XVI started to have huge financial troubles, and also the crops failed. In 1789, they called for the Estates General, and the Estates General is a rarely used Congress-type group. French intellectuals gathered, and these were lots of people who were supporters of the Enlightenment. The Estates Generals debated and finally meet on the King's Tennis Court, and they vow to save France from ruin. The result of this is the National Assembly of 1792. It ended feudalism. It dissolved the monarchy, so no more king, and it established the French Republic. Another huge result from this was a lot of bloodshed. The Jacobins seized control of the legislature, and the Jacobins were one of the parties in power. They were extremely violent. They engaged in terrorist acts. They believed in the greater good of the nation, and if you had to execute a lot of people to do that, that was no big deal. That's what you had to do. They were responsible for the Reign of Terror, which lasted for a year from 1793 to 95. So things got really out of hand in the Reign of Terror. About 40 to 50,000 people were said to have died as a result of this. So finally in 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte takes power, and in 1804 he is crowned emperor. But by 1814 he is defeated. So France during this time is an extremely politically charged place. It's turbulent, there's lots of bloodshed, and lots of power shifts. So when we were last in France, we saw that the Rococo style was a big deal in France. Well, neoclassical art also becomes a big deal. And the biggest, maybe, promoter or the person who is the best example of neoclassical art in France is Jacques-Louis David. He dominated neoclassicism in France during the Revolution and the reign of Napoleon. He did study with some Rococo artists like Boucher, and the French Academy gives out a scholarship to send a student to study in Rome for 4 years. And basically the state pays for whoever wins this scholarship. David tried to get this 4 different times. Finally he gets this, and he spends 6 years in Italy assimilating the principles of neoclassic art there. He returns to France and he paints this anti-Rococo paintings, and he also gets really involved in politics. Now this causes him a lot of trouble, but makes for some really interesting paintings. The themes of his art, particularly, they are usually politically charged. The themes are stoicism, masculinity, and patriotism. Now you do have a video on this, the Oath of the Horatii, but I do want to kind of reiterate some of the points that maybe the video doesn't go over so well. So we can see his themes of stoicism, masculinity, and patriotism in his art, particularly in this piece. This was commissioned by a French royal minister as a series of instructive paintings of French history. So it is a history painting. It was actually inspired by a 17th century play. The play is about the origins of the Roman Republic and about the end of the monarchy. So you can see how this would be a good subject for this time in France. So the story goes that Rome was in civil war with its neighboring city-state of Alba. They've been fighting for a while, and then finally they decide they're not like making any progress. Like nobody's winning, nobody's losing. So what they're going to do is each side is going to choose their 3 best warriors, and they're going to fight to the death, and whoever is still standing will be the winners of the war. So it actually ends up becoming a battle between 2 families. 3 brothers are the Horatii, and they are representing Rome, and then another 3 brothers are the Coratii, and they are representing Alba. So they basically fight to the death, and only one of the Horatii brothers survive. Now it gets a little bit more complicated than that, because he is actually engaged to a Coratii sister. And his sister is also engaged, was engaged to one of the Coratii brothers who died. So when he gets home, he's just fought to the death. He comes home, 2 of his brothers have died. He's killed these other 3 guys. He comes home and he sees his sister. And his sister is devastated because the man she was supposed to marry is dead. So she's crying for her lost love. He becomes so enraged by this that he kills her. And he's actually condemned to death, but his father ends up saving him. Now the painting was actually commissioned for the moment where the father is supposed to save his son. But David decided, you know what? No, I don't like that idea. That's not a good idea. I'm going to change the moment to when the 3 brothers take the oath to fight for their country. Now this is actually a big deal. Changing the moment that is getting depicted is a huge deal. David is basically saying, I am in control of my work, not the patron. I know what's best, so the artist knows best. And in fact, this statement, this action, the fact that he changes the moment and says, you know what, I know better than you do, patron, is the foundation for modern art. He also increased the size of the painting by almost 50%. It's almost 11 by 14 feet. And he did this because he was thinking about its placement in the salon. So here is a image of the Salon of 1785, and so he was thinking about where it was going to be displayed, and he really wanted it to kind of dominate the room. And indeed, you can see that it did. So we have this Roman Republic story. We have this history painting. It is a classic scene. They're wearing classical dresses, or, well, dress, costumes. They're accompanied by very classic architecture set in that setting. We have idealized figures, and this is meant to emphasize the heroism of the moment. Now, like I said, David's work was political, and this was the nature of France during this time. This was painted right before the French Revolution of 1789. And by seeing this oath promotes the idea that you fight for your country. You fight for higher ideals than yourself, no matter what personal costs. So it's the story of these men willing to give up their lives to fight for their country, dying for the greater good, and the dawn of the Roman Republic. So no surprise, this moment, the Oath of the Horatii, becomes an emblem for the French Revolution. Just to show you a couple more images by David, this is his image of Napoleon. David thought that Napoleon was going to be the savior of France, and I think you really get a sense of that when you're looking at this image. He does look like this idealized hero charging ahead to save France. I think David does a great job expressing that. And there's even like some sunlight coming through the clouds to express hope for the future. I just bring this image in so you can see the dramatic contrast between the neoclassical style, the history paintings, and that Rococo style. Completely stylistically different, and of course this is like the frivolous style of the elite. They're just enjoying their wonderful day at the park or on this island of love. Whereas here we have, this is basically another story talking about giving up your personal, any sort of personal sentiment or desires for the good of the state.